So welcome everyone. We are pleased to host this afternoon's training workshop on workplace harassment prevention. My name is Lynn McDonough-Hughes with TIANS and the Nova Scotia Tourism Human Resource Council. Before we begin, I would like to respectfully acknowledge that we live and work on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. These lands are governed by the treaties of peace and friendship, first signed in 1726. We also recognize and honor the more than 400-year legacy of the African descent in Nova Scotia and offer gratitude to the ancestors who came before us. As of September 2025, Nova Scotia's Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulations were updated to include workplace harassment. Today's session will help provide the knowledge and tools needed to understand the regulatory changes, recognize different forms of harassment, and respond appropriately. Joining us today is Anne Devine, founder and CEO of Ashanti Leadership. Anne's expertise lies in human resource management, governance, and strategy. So welcome, Anne. Thank you for being here today, all of you. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Anne, and she's going to lead today's session. And if people are comfortable with their cameras on, that would be lovely so that Anne can see as many of you as possible. It's all yours, Anne.
Oh, thank you ever so much, Lynn. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our session this afternoon. Today we have my colleagues, Rosanna and Pelton. Rosanna is our executive assistant. She does a lot of virtual work. We have been together for 10 years, and Rosanna is my boss. She takes charge of everything. And I'd like to introduce you also to our colleague, Rosemary Cadogan, fondly known as Rose. Rose and I worked together at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission for several years. And then she took off and went to the UK to do this amazing job as a lawyer representing countries on resolving border issues. So if you imagine, if she was still in England, they probably would send her off to one of these wonderful places where there are border disputes. And that is the caliber that we have amongst us today. Rose, she is very professional in that regard. So I'd like to thank you, Rose. Thank you, Rosanna, for being here today. I'd like to say thank you to all of you. Lynn, a special thanks to you for taking up this time and opportunity to involve your colleagues and members of TIANS to participate in this training today. Thank you very much for doing the land acknowledgement. So that is an area, Rosanna, we could skip. We don't have to do the land acknowledgement. Before I go any further, I'd like to also acknowledge that it is African Heritage Month in Nova Scotia. Sometimes it's referred to as Black History Month, but here we talk about African heritage. And the title for this month is 2025 is Strength in Unity. And my undertaking is that together, as we work together on this program this afternoon, I acknowledge that everyone here has strengths that we can combine, collaborate, host meaningful conversations, and have a really great learning session together. Now, why are we here today? As I welcome you, one of the things that I'd like to give you a little bit of background, and some of you would probably already know this, that our government undertook a survey in 2024, and they asked individuals, employees, employers, about harassment in the workplace. And as a result of this, our government said, we have heard from employees and employers across Nova Scotia that this is something that was necessary. particularly the Nova Scotia manufacturing sector, which employs roughly 36,000 people, is also preparing to make a shift to start doing this work. And we know all workers in Canada, all workers in Nova Scotia have the right to feel safe, have the right to be free from harassment in the workplace. Because when we have individuals who are free from harassment, free from violence in the workplace, we know that we have a very healthy work environment. We know that our gross domestic products would continue to rise because we will have fewer absenteeism. We'll have fewer people being off because of mental health issues, fewer illnesses. Because as we know, when somebody is not comfortable in the work environment, it manifests itself in different ways. So provincially, it is meant that we all employees, this regulation that came into being on the 1st of September, encourage everyone to take steps to prevent workplace harassment, including creating and implementing written harassment policies. And if I might say, this is not something that is new. Um, it's been around for quite some time. We, at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, when we did our education program, I was the manager for race relations equity there. And so when people brought their complaints to the Human Rights Commission, part of the work that we did was to create educational opportunities and training for businesses. So we went into various organizations and trained them. But at the time, nobody wanted to talk about harassment. Nobody wanted to be trained. So over the years, harassment, instead of calling it harassment in the workplace, it morphed into respectful workplace training. So, but I'm so delighted when the government brought it back and started from the 1st of September, stated that every 2 years, businesses, all businesses in Nova Scotia should undertake this training. So, Lynn, you are ahead of the game. Thank you, Rosanna. Can we move to the next slide? Can we move on from this one? Yes. Yeah. So here are the purpose of why we're here today is to ensure that we are all in compliance. I include myself in that because I have people who work with me on a regular basis. And so therefore, unless if we're in compliance, we're not going to be able to function in the workplace that we would like to. So part of those regulations are the Nova Scotia Occupational Health and Safety Act. It is regulated and governed by the Nova Scotia Violence in the Workplace Regulations, Workplace Harassment Regulations, which was amended in 2020, as well as the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act. But I also believe some people here might be associated with federal government, so they will come under the Canadian Human Rights Act. And the purpose is to promote safe, respectful, and inclusive workplace in our province and to bring some clarity to our employees and employers and responsibilities. What is our responsibility? Thank you, Rosanna. And what you will learn today is the type of workplace harassment and violence. Gain some insight into the legal duties here in Nova Scotia and recognize those prohibited behavior under human rights laws. We don't talk much about human rights at the moment, but I think it behoves each one of us on this call as leaders in our community, as participants in our work environment. One of the first principles that we talk about at the Nova Scotia Human Rights is to treat everyone with respect and dignity. So how do we respond effectively as a worker, as a supervisor, or as somebody who's a bystander? And how we can use workplace reporting protocols to correct what's happening in our workplaces today and to contribute to a free and a workplace that the culture where, according to our Minister for Employment it said that it is desired that every workplace must be respectful. It is important that every workplace, big or small, has the awareness and the resource to prevent and address harassment effectively. Our Minister Nolan Young, who is the person who is responsible for employment, is very clear on this. He believes that every Nova Scotian have the right to feel safe in the workplace because after all, that's where we spend a considerable amount of time. Can we move to the next slide, please? And I would encourage you to, if you have any points, any questions, please ask as we go along because this is where we will get the dialogue. So I don't want to be talking at you all the time. Yes, so what to expect? We have the legal framework, both, as I said, the Nova Scotia Human Rights and Canadian Human Rights Commission, understanding harassment. Do you have a policy in your workplace to prevent? When I was at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission, I would always say to people, folks would say, but we don't have anywhere to put policies and so on about these things. These are simple things and easily resolved. Everybody goes to the bathroom, put it on the bathroom wall. Most people use the kitchen, put it in the kitchen. So it cannot be missed. Everybody has the opportunity to see what is there. And if by chance you hear anything that's happening and you don't feel comfortable enough to speak up about it, find a person, find somebody who you can speak to confidentially about this. So it's important. And it's not just one person's responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. So when things occur in the workplace, it is investigated immediately. And we've tried to find the lowest level of resolution before we get to the Human Rights Commission or before we get to put the organization in a position where they feel they have to defend themselves. Let us try and resolve it at the lowest level possible. Thanks very much, Rosanna. Well, this is our legal framework, the protected characteristics against discrimination. And you will get these slides at the end of our presentation today. So you can, this is just the tester, the beginning. You can work on it and broaden it, but those with the asterisk, these are the things that we have in common. These protected characteristics we have in common with the Canadian human rights. They have a couple more categories that are broader than ours, but still the fundamentals are important and they're the same. So age, your ethnicity, your nationality, your origin, these are protected characteristics, and there are 17 protected characteristics in Nova Scotia under which you cannot discriminate. Rose, is there anything you want to contribute?
Not so far, Anne. I find that this is a very good intro to what workplace harassment is and understanding how it differs from other forms of harassment is important. So I think
Wonderful.
this is a really good intro to it, linking it with the Human Rights Acts and provincial codes and the Charter, of course.
Wonderful. Yes, the Charter of Human Rights. Yes, thank you very much, Rose. Okay. Oh, go ahead, Rhonda, please.
I was just wondering if you could say more about the last thing on the left-hand column about the irrational fear. It's not something
Yes.
I've seen before.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, you know, the irrational fear that came into being when there was the SARS um, disease that broke out in Canada. I wasn't here at the time, but I can't remember what year that it was. It was in it was in the mid 80s. We had SARS, and people were just afraid. In the similar way, like what would bring it home closer to us when we had COVID. Um, if anybody coughed, people were afraid that they would catch it. That was a reasonable fear, mind you. So because we knew that that was the source of, COVID, but the SARS was different, I understand. That was when it came into being that sometimes we have an irrational fear that we will catch this disease. If somebody is in your office or in your environment and they have a skin condition, sometimes people are afraid to go near to them just in case they catch it. But it might be something that is an immunity breakdown in their system, but not something that another person will catch. Those are irrational fear of getting a disease, contracting an illness or a disease. Does that help? Good. Thank you. Anyone else before we move forward? Thank you, Rosanna. Nova Scotia, the requirement in the workplace, we must have a written harassment prevention policy. That is critical. So if you don't have one, this is the time when you can have, there's a template. The Halifax Chamber of Commerce has created a template for those of you who do not have one. You can look there and you will see how it's done. One of the good things about this regulation is that our government did their homework and they said, we heard from 630 something people who spoke to us about this particular concern that they have. And so what they not only wrote the information from the survey that they conducted, but they also provided toolkits. So if you look on the website, harassment prevention, you will see that there are toolkits there. There's information there that can help you prepare your policy. And even sometimes, I think with the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, they've even got a draft outline of a policy that you can use. So it means that every one of us, because I know most of us as small business owners, and you only have perhaps about 5 people maximum. And sometimes people do ask, well, why do I have to have this? You have this to protect yourself. You have this to protect your employee. It's about all of us. The risk of violence assessment and hazard identification. Many of our small businesses are working in amongst very hazardous chemicals and environment. So we have to find a way of creating policies so that we are not having to rely on workers' compensation. I'm sure the workers, Nova Scotia workers' compensation would tell us that the significant numbers of people that they're having to support, they would like to see those numbers reduce. So we also have a mandatory reporting procedures. It is important for supervisors to have the appropriate training. It's also important for employees to know their rights, and employers must also know their rights and their duty as to what is required of them to be able to do this. It's also very confidential. So I'd like to pause here to ask you, how many of you have had the experience of creating your harassment workplace policy? Oh, thank you. Lori, are you able to share that? Rosanna, can we come back to the group, please?
I'm sorry, Anne, what do you
Hi,
want me
I'm
to do?
sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not feeling so well.
Can we
Don't have my camera
okay.
on. But we have just gone through the process with a lawyer to
Mhm.
create a workplace prevention harassment policy.
Yes.
And we are presenting that to the board on next Wednesday. So I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested in it. What I am interested in, and that you mentioned the violence assessment, we don't have that. I'd be interested in learning more about how we assess our organization for violence.
Yes.
Question.
Okay, I can provide some information on that. I don't have it here with me, but most definitely we can ensure that you get something within the next couple of days. So I will send it to Lynn, and Lynn can circulate it for us. Yeah, thank you ever so much. I noticed there are a couple of things in the chat. Oh, it's okay, thank you very much. And thank you ever so much, Lori. Okay, are there any further questions? Jose, thank you very much for being here today. We missed you in the introduction, so just want to and promise the folks from Fox Harbor Resort. Wow, just want to say welcome. Yeah. Any other questions? Can we move on? Yeah. Please feel free to stop and ask questions. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Can we move on to the next slide? Thank you very much. Yes. You know, I should have asked you, or I can still ask you yourselves, how do you see workplace harassment? Is it something that occurs naturally, or is it something that you work very hard to ensure that none of this behavior takes place in your workplace? Let's hear from you. Before the regulation, let's hear from you before we go into the definition.
I can share.
Yes, thank you, Tiffany.
Okay, no problem. I think we do take it very seriously. I wouldn't say we see a lot of it. I
Yes.
think you can work very, very hard at it. I think you're still going to have it. But we make sure that we respond
Yeah.
as quickly as possible. And with the utmost seriousness and, confidentiality about any situation that might be categorized as harassment or bullying.
Yes. Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh, hi, Emily. I'm happy to share as well. Yeah, we obviously, really focus on creating a culture where everyone feels welcome, supported, valued, and engaged.
Yes.
We reinforce that policy, among others, in sort of the orientation process. So it's
Yes.
one of the policies and processes that they receive so that they're clear sort of on that expectation, and then continue to reinforce that through our culture. And then if situations do arise, which luckily is very infrequent, if they do, we take it obviously very seriously and fully investigate it so that people feel that we are obviously following what we request from a culture perspective. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you both very much for sharing that. It's so important that it is addressed immediately when we find ourselves in this situation. Carol, did you want to say something? Go
Sure.
ahead.
I was just going to say, we had a meeting this morning and we were just kind of chatting. We had an engagement survey completed with our employees late 2025, and the actual harassment policy scored very favorably as a safe environment and a workplace that is open and into discussion and take it very seriously. So we were really pleased that the payoff, similar to Emily, working with our onboarding and our leadership teams and really ensuring that we have a culture of talking about it and communicating about it. And in this climate too, where we're dealing with customers, that there's different levels of expectation and behaviors. So it's become a more common kind of dialogue, and what can we do to train, educate, and help our employees so that they can be in a safe workplace that respects all aspects of how this might show up.
Wonderful. Thank you both very much. There's some significant things. Onboarding, as soon as the person is coming into the organization, they get familiar with the policies and the practices, ensure that they sign those documents and have them returned to you. So you have them on file. So no one can say that they weren't aware of what the policies are. They don't understand it. You encourage them to come to you if they don't understand it so that you can give them clarifications. The other thing is about dealing with customers. This is one area that a lot of people are asking about because increasingly, for some reason, this is the season of customer harassing employees, being disrespectful. Folks are having to put up notice saying that we won't tolerate this kind of behavior within our work environment. Hospitals have started to put those around. They were there on sometimes, but it's becoming more frequently. I'm seeing these notices in places where individuals are being served. And at the end, who gets a lot of the bad behavior? It's the customers sometimes who throw it at the employees. So those are things that and how do employees cope with that? Because some people don't have the skills to do it and they cannot retaliate because they're protecting their employer or protecting themselves in many instances. So as employers, we have got to be vigilant in supporting our employees as well. Those front-facing employees, frontline staff, they do put up with a lot of harassment. It's important. Anything else? Go ahead, Rose.
If I could, Anne, I think we're actually
Of course.
answering part of the question now about the risk assessment, the violence risk assessment. Because
Yes.
some of these things that you've mentioned, customer service, client-facing environments where you're interacting with the public, and more particularly, some forms of employment that are high risk. Think
Yes.
about tax season. People tend to get really, really worked up around tax season. Think about
Yes.
bus drivers. Think about people who work with care. So
Yes.
there are particular occupations that are high risk. And so the violence risk assessment is really something that should be done as a matter of course in those situations. So we're actually talking about some of the elements of the risk assessment.
Absolutely. And it's just, I think it was last week I heard on the radio that bus drivers experience a lot of hostility, particularly if they're bus drivers from a different country or of a different race. They've been told to go back to your country and they've been screamed and shouted at. And that was something that didn't occur. I used to take the bus to work on a daily basis. But this is on the rise at the moment. Yeah. Okay. Another legal framework that helps us to understand the workplace environment is Bill C-65. That's a comprehensive framework that they provide in preventing harassment, sexual harassment in the workplace, violence, including psychological safety, bullying. That is something that goes on in so many different ways. One of the things that we found when we first moved onto online training, many people were experiencing bullying from colleagues who could just, even though they were working from home, they found that there was a high percentage of harassment online. And it doesn't just happen in the workplace. It moves from the workplace and it moves outside of the workplace as well. And I know oftentimes people would argue that if it's outside of the workplace, it's nothing to do with us. But if there's an employee who is working in your organization and is harassing someone else who is working in your organization also, but outside of the workplace, then you have a duty and a responsibility to do something as well. So these are some of the things that are happening in our workplaces. Can we move on? Thanks very much, Rosanna, for the next slide. And the interesting thing about the conversation that we're having, we don't have to go through slide by slide. You know, if you have anything you want to raise, I can assure you, one of the good things about having a conversation is that some of the things that we have in the slides will naturally come up in the conversations. So going through the slides sometimes can be boring. And that's not my style of working. I always encourage people to participate, and so that it encourages each other to, and we learn a lot more from each other by doing that. So where can harassment, apart from, as I said, our work environment, social media, email, online, that can, a lot of harassment can exist there. It can exist without the intention to harass. This is it, this happens. But also, we know that if it is unsolicited or unwelcome, it's harassment. We know people experience violence, physical violence, pushing, shoving, all of these things happen in the workplace. One of the things that we have discovered while doing this work is that oftentimes there's also intimate partner violence that's happening in the workplace. So that individual, regardless of their race or their sex or gender, come into the workplace already being violated, or being harassed or being threatened with violence. And then they come into the workplace and they're facing the same kind of behavior. Again, the workplace, according to our Minister Nolan, ought to be a safe place, a place of refuge where all Nova Scotians feel that they have that sense of belonging in the work environment. So we're working very hard to eliminate this kind of behavior that's impacting in our workplace at the moment. Next one, please, Rosanna. Next slide. Do you have any questions, anyone, to ask? Well, intent versus impact. The intent behind the behavior or the reaction does not determine whether if it is harassment. But if the behavior or the action leads to another feeling humiliated, intimidated, degraded as a result, then it can be deemed as harassment. Because sometimes people don't stop to think that my behavior could be intimidating towards someone else, or I might be causing that individual some psychological distress, fear. And when this happens, how does it impact our workplace? Well, we have job losses. Our job performance is poor. It has a health impact. There's also stress and anxiety. And as I said, prolonged absenteeism from work. And it costs the organizations billions of dollars each year. And that cost impacts on our gross domestic product. So when we say, okay, it doesn't impact me, yes, it does, because you know what? We're having to pay the costs through different mediums. What about our organizational impact? Increased turnover. We can also loss of productivity, our legal reputation. One of the things that people fear the most is actually going before the Human Rights Commission. Employees are really besides themselves with fear. And that it is not necessary, because if we do the groundwork in advance, if we pay attention to what is going on in our organization, then we can save the reputation, we can save legal costs, and we can save the financial risk that we experience, as well as work compensation claims. These are all things that are costly to our work environment. I'm going to pause there for a moment and check in with you to see if you have any questions. Thanks, Rosanna. Can we come back to the main? Hi, everyone. I'm going to pause there for a moment to see if you have any questions, comments, observation. No? You all agree with me? You trust me then. Okay, okay. All right, let's move on. Please move on to the next slide, Rosanna. Let's talk about the types of harassment. Let's go back to the main group so I can see everyone. Okay. Let's talk about the types of harassment that happens within our workplace or that we might consider as harassment.
I just had a question, Anne. I saw on the slide there, one of the forms in the first line was visual.
Verbal.
Thought it also said visual
Visual?
harassment.
Yes.
I'm just curious what that is or what that means. I don't think I've heard that before.
Well, you know, you see it happening and you take a standby attitude to, so you know it's happening, but you turn around and you think, oh, well, that's not my business. So somebody else can deal with it. And sometimes that is because of fear. That's because you might have a friend who is doing the harassment. And, you know, oftentimes when people come to me and say to me, well, you know, and Rosanna is harassing me. If she doesn't mind me using her as an example, as a form to demonstrate this. And you know what I would say immediately to that individual? No, Rosanna would never do that. And sometimes I can see it happening, but I don't want to believe it. I'll say, oh no, she would never do that. And the reason why I'm saying she would never do that is because she's my friend. We went to school together. Our family go away on holiday together. We do so many things together. And so therefore, it is not possible that she's going to do something like that. But it happens. And you have to take the responsibility of going to speak to Rosanna. Now, how would you do that? Because she's your friend. You've seen it happening, but you've decided that you're not going to do anything about it. So all of those things we have to take into account when we're in the work environment. It's not just about me and my friend. It's about the entire workforce, individuals that we're working with, our colleagues. Everyone matters, including those janitorial staff who come into our workplace every day, do their jobs, get treated badly, and then they're gone. You know, I always say to employers, remember those individuals that you're treating badly, they don't deserve it because, you know, they're keeping your environment safe and clean. And that is important. Anyone else? Observation? Rose, I'm going to turn to you using your expertise and knowledge. Is there anything else you might want to have?
I'm just wondering, and I'm thinking that you might come to it sometime in the presentation, and about
Yes.
where this might be happening at a very high level,
Yes.
and an employee might feel threatened if they
Yes.
report something. So
Yes.
figuring out how to handle something that you think is above your pay grade, how you might want to deal with a situation like that. So
Yeah.
maybe we can discuss this somewhere along the line.
Yeah. Well, let's do it now. Open. What does the group think? You see, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know. And you probably don't already put into practice in your work environment. You know, this is something. And usually, in most cases, when the harassment is happening, it's happening because somebody else has the power over you. It could be sexual harassment, it could be bullying, it could be denying you of an opportunity that you're looking for promotion and you're not being given the promotion because somebody feels that not that your work is not good enough or they don't value what you bring to the table. All of those things. It's really important that we check how we are responding to different things that's happening in the workplace. Usually it could be employee to employee, or it could be employee, employer, and some employers do get bullied. Some employers do get bullied. I've worked with some of them. Yesterday, for example, someone was saying to me, I don't know how to handle this because this person is literally bullying me. Now, how would you as a leader in your organization handle it if someone else, an employee, is bullying you? You know, we always like to think it's the employee and the employer, but sometimes the employer is being bullied by the employee. How do you respond to something like that? Well, you have boards. As the CEO, would you take it, or would you take it to report it to the board? Would you ask for help? Would you turn to one of your colleagues? Would you invite someone like me to come in and have a conversation, a general conversation with everyone, so that everyone become aware that these things are happening? This is what I had to do yesterday. I have a general conversation about bullying in the workplace because the employer did not want to single out anyone, but wanted people to know that they are aware that it's happening in the workplace. So how would you, as leaders in your organization, manage a situation like this? Well, I'd like you to take that one away and think about it. I'm not going to give you the answer because one day you might have to draw on your policies and your practice to see, how do I manage this situation? Would you allow me to come into your organization and bully you? No. Would you? If I were invited to come in to do a presentation to you, because this does happen, people do feel that they invite someone and the person came in and was disrespectful to them.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
My name is Yvonne.
Hi, Yvonne.
Hi, everybody. So I'm thinking that if that happened to me as a supervisor or manager, the first thing that I'm going to do is to talk with this person and tell him or tell her how I feel and see if the person understands, because especially in hospitality, we have to think in the English barrier, in the language barrier,
Yes.
and in the culture. So
Mhm.
yeah, we work with different people from around the world. So
Yes.
all the cultures are different. And maybe these people, maybe they're not aware about the language that they are using.
Mhm.
If we don't agree with a solution, obviously we would need to ask for a third person
Yeah.
to help us to manage this situation.
Yes.
But also I would like to share that 5 years ago, as an employee in another country, that happened to me. I was hired to work in a company, and the person who hired me, it was talking about my people from my country in the lunch area. And she was talking bad about people from my country. I was like, okay. And everybody was looking at me, and I was like, what can I do? And I just have like 2 weeks in this position. And I was like, I cannot say anything because I don't want to lose the job. So in that moment, you feel like, okay, what can I do? So I'm happy that I'm here now in Canada, and we have access to these kind of topics, because obviously as an immigrant, you can see a lot of harassment
Yes.
because of your nationality, your age, and Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yes. Thank you ever so much. That was really helpful and insightful because we've been given that from a different perspective culturally. Some people don't like to be spoken to by a female leader because that's what their culture is about. Sometimes when you're having a conversation with individuals, somebody might lower their gaze and you might think that that's insubordination when in fact they are not. The opportunity for them to speak to their senior or the person in authority is not expected that they look at them in the eye. All of those kind of cultural nuances does come into the workplace. So it's up to us to have a conversation also and get to understand, especially when you have new employees. Increasingly, our environment is becoming more diverse. We have so many different cultures, languages being spoken, and so therefore people do find it hard at times too. So thank you ever so much for sharing that. Any further comments before we move on? Comments or observation? Thank you. Thank you so much because I know at your environment, you have been doing this for several years now and you do such a good job. So you help with that tourism piece very well. Okay, anything else? Okay, Rosanna, we'll go back to our, um, so here we go. We have the types of workplace harassment. We have verbal, we have physical, we have written, visual, there's sexual harassment, microaggression. And sometimes people say to me, well, what's that? It's those tiny little things that you do to individuals to make them feel comfortable. And you know, sometimes you blink, you miss it, and you think, did that really happen to me? Did she really say that? Did she really put me down in that way? And so therefore, those are things that we also have to look out for. We've talked a little bit about, mentioned a little bit about online bullying. When we started due to COVID coming online, a lot of people found that they were being bullied. It was an opportunity where individuals got a brief insight into what our homes were like. And so people took advantage of that and started to bully people and harass them. And harassment comes in for different reasons as well. We talked about the third party, the customer, who often harass individuals. The power base, for example, the supervisor, subordinate, that is something that we also have to look at. And these take many different forms. It takes the form of verbal, shouting. You go to meetings sometimes and people are shouting at each other and you're thinking, my goodness, why am I in this place? Those are things that happen on a regular basis in the work environment. Written abuse or threats, and sometimes you do not know where they're coming from. A couple of years ago, 2024, we were working with a large organization and they brought in some people of African descent to work in the environment. And all of a sudden, this was a very secure place with a lot of cameras. And yet somebody managed to put a noose in a place at somebody's workstation. Now, there's no way you're going to find that who did that as an employer. It could be a combination of individuals who did it, but it was there. We couldn't find who done it, but we know that this is what was going on in the work environment. We went in to investigate to see how we can support the victims of this awful behavior. So sometimes you don't have to say words, you just do certain things. Insulting, derogatory behavior, degrading, and even sometimes the jokes. And do you know that sometimes people join in the jokes when it's been made of them? because they want to feel a part of, or they don't feel safe. So they participate, and sometimes bystanders are the ones who are having to say, no, this is not good, and stand up for the employee. Malicious gossip, ridicule, individuals' religion, and those jokes, as I said, mention religious jokes that we often hear people talking about. I want us to come back as a group so we can talk about a couple of areas that are happening that has been brought to our attention. Misgendering people, individuals who have chosen not to self-identify in a particular way, or they have come and they've said to you, well, you know, I'm going through certain changes. I'm transitioning from male to female or from female to male. And they've asked us not to use the name that they're known by. They've given us the information. And so therefore, we choose not to call them by the name. And I saw it just a couple of weeks ago, someone who's transitioning, and they chose not to. Now, it wasn't my place to say that was wrong because I was not a part of the conversation, but I knew what was happening. So, what do you think I should have done in that instance? I heard somebody misgendering a person after they came out and said that they're transitioning. What do you think I should have done? Do you think I should have called the person out? You're very quiet.
And I think I would have talked to the individual like privately, not necessarily in any public forum. I would have had a conversation privately, and you know, it's a good reminder sometimes for people to understand, and you know, intentionally or unintentionally, but it's how it lands and how it makes somebody else feel. So I think it's important to recognize that in a way that, yeah, I would start soft first, I guess.
I agree with you. Anyone else?
If I could come in here, Anne, and
Yes.
take us back a little bit to the restorative procedures, the practices that the Human Rights Commission brought in.
Yes.
I think there were exceptions. I don't think you could use it in cases of sexual offenses, but the settlement conferences were a means of allowing the parties to come together. I mean, there are layers of reactions,
Yes.
layers of procedures, and this was one that offered an opportunity for the parties to be heard.
Yes.
You came together in a room with a facilitator, and you were given the chance. I think lawyers were discouraged. They weren't happy about that, but lawyers were
That is true.
discouraged. The aim was not to have it as a legalistic procedure, and it didn't go to the board. It didn't go to the commission.
So
those
restorative
were
would
the
be,
parties, yes, it
yeah.
didn't go to the commission unless there was a settlement agreement, and then that went to be approved. But the
Yes.
parties sometimes just the opportunity to sit in the room and to say, this hurt me. This is how I heard it. You might not have meant it. Now I hear what you've said, but this is how I felt. And sometimes just given the opportunity to be heard and to sit in a situation, in a scenario where you could speak without fear of, obviously a safe space, where you
Yes.
could speak without fear of retribution. That also was an avenue that worked. There were exceptions, I should point out, that
Yes.
was allowed. But in a lot of cases, employment cases, discrimination on the grounds of pregnancy, and so on and so on, those were areas. Once the parties consented, it worked.
Yes. I would agree with you entirely, Rose. And it still does work because it's a lot of the cases have been processed through the restorative form of settlement. But I want to go back to misgendering before we move forward. Jennifer, sorry, I've forgotten her last name, who does inclusive leadership, talks about calling in rather than calling out. So in that instance, I'm not going to call out the person, but I have the opportunity, as Rose said, and you said, to put them, call them aside and have a brief conversation and let them know. And I'll tell you my own personal experience. We have someone on our team who I have misgendered, and I'm so grateful that I have individuals on my team who would say to me, "You did this, Anne." I did that a couple of times, and they didn't let me off with it. However, one of the things that we have to do is the person who was, I would say, I'm not even sure if I should call them a victim because they wouldn't see themselves as a victim, would they, Rosanna? They just said to me, "Look, you've apologized," and that's it. So we apologize and we move on. Don't make a big deal about it. Don't make it about yourself. You just apologize and move on. And this is what I said to the other person. This is what you've done. Please, next time it happens, just apologize and move on. And that's it. Because the individuals who've experienced the misgendering often don't want you to really focus on them. They just want to support you and educate you about how this could have been handled differently. So we are all in a process of learning. None of us are perfect. And in these instances, we have to support each other because that's the only way that we're going to be able to move forward in our work. We're not going to allow it to escalate. Yes? Any questions, observations?
I just kind of wanted to build on what Carol had said. I think creating an environment that's open to discussion on areas maybe where maybe someone doesn't have a full understanding of what's even being asked of them. I think if you can establish that environment that allows people to have open conversations, or making sure that they have a supportive relationship with a manager if they wanted to have a further discussion on it, maybe behind closed doors, I think would help build on the success of implementing kind of that fair, or maybe avoiding some of those escalations.
Yes, I agree with you entirely. Carol, you're shaking your head. Did you want to come back on that?
No, what she said is having that safe space where people can have those conversations and support and educate people along that process. And I think the biggest thing is not ignoring it. And one of the things, there's a colleague sitting here, Samantha, as well. She said, and sometimes it's just putting yourself in the conversations and using the right name, using the right reference to the individuals can kind of help get the dialogue on track in that current moment as well, without necessarily maybe singling somebody out. So I think there's different approaches based on people's experience and knowledge. And similar to you, Anne, we all need the support and the reminders in that to be able to how we all engage in and recognizing that we're all not perfect, and I think we're in this together to support each other.
Yes. Thank you ever so much. And please say thank you to your colleague at the back, because that was such an important point that was being made.
Yes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, Rosanna. Before we move on, Rosanna, what do you think is not, we've talked a lot about what is harassment. What would you consider is not harassment? Go ahead, Tiffany.
Thank you. Sorry, jumping in again. I was just thinking as I was looking through, I think it might have been the last slide, some of the examples there. And I was kind of thinking, like, I wonder where, and I'd like maybe everyone's input on this, where would favoritism find itself kind of, is it considered harassment? Is it maybe just, I don't know. Yeah, I'd like to know where everyone feels that favoritism kind of falls.
Yes. During COVID, we started to call that proximity bias, where somebody who was in the office was treated more favorably than the person who was working from home. And that was because they're in the office and the other person is at home. So, yeah, what do you think? Don't be shy. There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong question. Well, we see favoritism happening in the workplace all the time. It's nothing new to any of us. There's some individuals who get more favored treatment than others. And I don't even know if sometimes the individuals who are doing it recognize that they're doing it, you know? Okay,
So
go ahead.
I was just thinking about it in terms of um, the individual who is experiencing the favoritism, they may not enjoy it. It may feel it's a form of harassment. And then their colleagues may see it as harassment to them, an indirect harassment to them because they are not the favorites. They are not experiencing the favoritism. So I could certainly see how the individuals who see themselves as in not as favorable a light would consider that harassment. I could see how that would be perceived as harassment.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And Promise said, I feel it would be considered that since people will feel their work are degraded, you know, that's another take on it. Yes. We have to even check ourselves to see whether if we have any favorites, people that we prefer to work with other than ours, than another. We have to check ourselves because it does happen. It's very much alive. And what does that lead to? It leads to the other person feeling devalued, not a part of, not included, and feel excluded. And sometimes the conversation stops when you approach a group of people, or the conversation might be about you, and it stops immediately as you walk in, and nobody says anything. Everybody disperse. That used to happen at the water cooler. You need, thank goodness they're not in the work environment anymore. At one stage, they were seen as a place where people could congregate and laugh and have a good time. But it was a good time for some folks, not everyone, because the person who feel that they were being singled out by their colleagues did not feel comfortable. And that harassment sometimes is not just one person who might be bullying. It might be a group of individuals. And so therefore, we as employees have to be vigilant in the work environment and to see who's being targeted. It is our duty and our responsibility. And when they're being targeted, what do you do about it? Yeah. Shall we move on to the next slide, Rosanna? Thank you. So here are some what is not harassment. We talked about what is harassment. And sometimes people feel that, you know, their performance appraisal, you know, might be a form of harassment or not being fair, or feel that decisions have made for them and about them that is not reasonable. So those are things that, you know, you can discuss. I'm sure you've experienced them where people feel that I should have gotten a raise, or I should have been given a bonus, or I wasn't given that. for whatever reason, and they might become disgruntled. And you have the opportunity to sit down and explain to them what's happening. Interpersonal conflict is normal in a work environment. But one of the things that you have to be mindful of is not to enable it to escalate into something where people feel that they are not comfortable. Consensual workplace banter. Sometimes those banters can turn into something else and escalate. So we also have to watch out for that. Organization decisions that are lawful and reasonable, they are not harassment. Friendly compliment or warm compliments that are not driven by negative intention or ought to be known as welcome. You know, sometimes we may have a banter, we may give a compliment, but that compliment might not be a compliment. It might be something else underneath that. So those are things we have to watch out for as well. Yeah. Because it can become somewhat toxic in the work environment, as well as can be seen as discriminatory conduct. Yes. Any observations? Shall we move on? I'm going to come back to you and ask you whether if you have had to address anything like this in your workplace, and what were some of the tools that you use so that others can benefit from it. So, Rosanna, can we come back to the group, please? So, what are some of the, because we want to share our knowledge, our expertise with our colleagues, what are some of the tools that you have used to overcome workplace harassment? I know this is the graveyard shift.
I'm just thinking, luckily we haven't had a lot of harassment situations arrive. It's actually been quite some time. But I think just continuing to educate associates about respectful work,
Yes.
respectful behavior in the workplace,
Yes.
ensuring that it's sort of weaved through all sorts of different communications. And also modeled, of course, by our leadership team on a regular basis. And then if they see anything that they think is, not appropriate in any form, even if it is mild, that they address it immediately, and just continue to reinforce that. So I would just say like ongoing training, modeling from a leadership perspective, being really vigilant and not letting things slide if they see something that is a bit inappropriate or could make people feel uncomfortable. I think it's a constant, it has to be a constant focus at all times. Yeah. And then refreshers, training refreshers and yeah.
So it's not just a one and done. So when you've done here today, you're not just going to go away and close the book and think, okay, that was interesting, and was pretty boring. Oh my God, I couldn't wait to get away from there. And you close the book and you're done. No, that's not what it's about. You have a duty and a responsibility. You may not have picked up something from me, but you may have picked up something from our colleagues that were contributing to the conversation. And you're going to go back to your work environment and see how best can I use the knowledge that I picked up from today's conversation and create it in the form of a tool for us to benefit our work environment. That's why we're here today, to learn from each other, to collaborate together. And by so doing, we are going to ensure that our workplace is a place where everybody has that sense of belonging, where dignity and respect is at the top of our conversation. Oh, okay, Promise, you have a question. Can someone claim they have been harassed if they see two people engaging in consensual workplace banter, could that behavior from these two people be considered some sort of harassment? I would like to think, I would like to know what people think. Okay. Here's a thought, everyone.
We had a situation recently, it was very mild, but where an associate overheard a conversation between two associates that was joking, and they thought one of the associates in that conversation was not harassing, but being unprofessional and not supportive of their colleague. So they did raise it with their manager, and their manager, chatted with them about it, and then it was an opportunity just to, we always have to make sure that we're sensitive about the conversations that we're having in the workplace and how we, sort of talk to each other. And then it was just a learning opportunity all around to sort of address it both with those individuals, but also with the other associate. And they did the right thing. They brought it to their manager's attention because they were concerned about it. So then it facilitated some nice dialogue. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I have something that I can share with you that happened to me personally when I was in the workplace, working in a particular place. And myself and another colleague who was white was having a banter with each other. And the term that was used was because this person understood the terminology. And we were going back and forth because she had lived in England for a while, and she knew the term, the pot calling the kettle black. And that was the term that was used, and we both laughed. Somebody else was passing, and they heard it, and they went and reported it to the executive director. And we were both called in because the individual was offended by what was being said. Well, that was a serious lesson for me because I did not know that was something that you didn't say in the Nova Scotia work environment, and others were offended by that. So we were called in, we both had a conversation, and we apologized to the individual because it wasn't meant for that individual, but they took it as an insult. So, and that was a lesson to learn. So, um, a banter between two people can easily offend somebody else who might just be passing or might just listen. So the best thing to do is to apologize. It wasn't meant for you. And that was a real lesson that I learned that day. There's certain things that you just don't, no matter how much you may think it's okay to say. In a different culture, we talked about the person in Carol's team Yvonne talked about culture, about language, colloquialisms. That is something that you have to be so mindful of because every country have a different way of expressing things, and colloquialisms can get people into serious trouble. So we always have to be mindful. Any further questions? Shall we move on? Thank you, Rosanna. Yes. So I know some of you, although you've not said, you've probably got your policies already, and those policies should actually be promoting respect and equity in the work environment. I know there's certain words that in the last year or so that's not being used in the work environment as they should. People are afraid to use the word diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I trust that as we work together, I was really pleased to hear Prime Minister Mark Carney talked about Canada being a place of diverse perspectives, and diversity is our strength. So when we're talking about how we're going to do this, let us bear that in mind when we're creating our policies to create a respectful environment where equity is very much a part of what we're doing. We are here in Canada, we're still protected under human rights laws, we're still protected under the employment equity laws, and those four groups within the employment equity law, the Indigenous group, racialized group, women, and persons with disability, it's still very much high on the agenda for us here in Canada. These individuals are often the ones who are discriminated against and are frequently bullied in the work environment, these categories of people. So let us remember that. Include psychological health and safety practices. One of the things that I learned at the Commission, our executive director, that was the first time, way back in 2010, she started to talk to us about psychological safety. And you know what? Part of that, when you're leaving the work, now that we're all going back into the work environment, into the office, when you're leaving, checking on the other person to see if they are ready to go, or to let them know that you're leaving and they're the only one who's left in the office. That's all part of creating psychological safety. Being supportive. What do you have in your workspace? Should, in case somebody is not telling you, I'm not feeling well mentally today, is there a place where that individual can go and sit down and have some quiet time where it gives them the opportunity to, just relax? One of the things that we had at the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission was the quiet room, where reflecting on it, we were ahead of the game then. And you could go to this room and you could sit quietly and just have some time out for yourself. What about that person who's neurodiverse in your workplace? And people are often annoyed because this person, their Tourette's, their tics might be coming louder and louder. How do you support that individual? That is part of psychological safety. The person who has mental health issues, the person who is coming into the work environment on a daily basis and caring for their elderly parent, and that is a male person, and we're thinking to ourselves, oh, well, men don't feel. Yes, they do, because they are carers too. They also have individuals that they're taking care of at home. They have a young family. How do we support our colleague? These are things that part of our best practice that we include in our health and psychological safety policies and practices. Use clear language in communicating these policies. Plain English, Nova Scotia, according to the literacy, we don't have to make it complex language, because most people only have a grade 6 to 7 reading age. So we want to make it as simple as possible so that people feel that they're brought in. Invite colleagues into the conversation so they help you to create those policies and those practices, so you have buy-in from individuals. It's part of their responsibility, part of their commitment as well. So if we do those things by engaging everyone, and according to the requirements, at least once every 3 years, we should review our policies. Don't let them sit and gather dust, because that's not what they're meant to do. They're meant to be engaging. They're meant to be everyday working practices. We have a habit of creating policies, and then we take them down when we're in trouble, and we try to dust them down and to read them. By that time, it's too late. We should have already know the policies inside out. There should have been clear statements about zero tolerance, clear definitions as to what harassment is, reporting it along the way, investigate it step by step. And as Rose said, bringing together individuals, using that restorative approach whereby we can support each other, as well as having an anti-retaliation policy. So when somebody comes to you with a complaint, even if it's against your friend, you're not going to retaliate against that individual. You're going to be mindful, you're going to be supportive, you're going to speak to both parties, and you're going to build on your policies of no retaliation. Under the Human Rights Act, that would be a discriminatory practice. Okay, can we move forward again? So one of the things that we touched on is having a culture that is responsive in our work environment, recognizing and respecting different cultures. We all think, act, and behave differently. I behave, for example, I would say you could have two women of color, two Black women walking down the street, but the honest truth is that they have amongst themselves worked out how to learn to live with each other because they might be from two different cultures. A Haligonian has a different culture from somebody from Newfoundland or someone from Sydney. How do we respect each other's differences? So we have to ensure that the policies that we have, the communication, the training that we do, all of that has to be responsive because we want to create a strong culture of sense of belonging. And the more often we take into account those underrepresented groups in our environment, listen to them, hear what they have to say, and have those heartfelt conversations. Sometimes they can be complex, but if they're guided appropriately, using, recognizing that everyone has something to bring to the table, it would help us move forward. So the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission is always available to give you information. There's the new Office of Equity and Anti-Racism in government. So if you're an employee within the government of Nova Scotia, you have access to that process. Rosanna, can we move on to the next slide, please? So we talked about risk, violence, risk assessment, and hazard identification. It's critical for our workplace, particularly when we are working in a remote environment and in isolated workplaces. It's important that we have a risk management assessment plan. Some people don't, but it's important that you bring this into consideration and talk about it as employees. How are we going to protect that employee who is working remotely from the rest of the team, who is working sometimes in the field away from managers, that person who's working with that heavy equipment, person who's working with electricity. The Workers' Compensation Board will tell you, we know the results here are pretty high in Nova Scotia for injuries, workplace injuries. Every April 27th is the day when we mark the day for supporting workers in the workplace, those workers who have been injured. I think we had a couple of deaths last year. So those are things that we have to think about and we have to put them into practice. Particularly, one of the areas that we're asked to consider, to take into consideration now is intimate partner violence and domestic violence. This is occurring so frequently in our work environment. So please take note of that. It's since April 2022, after the mass murder, the commission recommend that this has to be part and parcel of what we do in our workplace, right? I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask you to give your contributions in the last few minutes that we have. Anything additional that we may have missed that you want to talk about, this is your time. Bearing in mind, confidentiality is critical and it's key. Okay. I know you're not sleeping. I can see that your eyes are wide open.
We're not sleeping, Anne. We're taking it all in. And we said, you know, it's a good reminder when we get together, and it's nice to hear other people kind of share their experiences or go through some of those points in more detail. So we appreciate this and the opportunity to kind of pause and reflect and you know, kind of either say, yay, we're doing this really well, or there's some areas that we can, you know, revisit again and make sure we're dusting it off and we keep the conversations going. So thank you. We appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you, Carol. You always say nice things. Come back again. Well, I want to encourage you as managers, leaders, employers, supervisors. You know, we have an obligation to ensure, as much as reasonably practical, that workers are not exposed to harassment with respect to any matter or any circumstances within the work environment. We have a duty, we have a responsibility, and employees have a responsibility also to report anything that they see that is not respectful within the workplace. Incidents occurs in the workplace hour by hour, but it's up to us as individuals, as employers, to support each other in the work environment. You know, outside of the workplace, you'd still have some responsibility if they're bearing the name of your work environment and they are working with you and harassment is ongoing. You do have a responsibility there to support those individuals. But one of the things that you can go for further guidance, as I said to you before, is the Nova Scotia Harassment in the Workplace Guide for Employers. Please take a look at it. Please do your policies. As I said to you, this is not new to anybody in the work environment, but it serves as a reminder to us. So our responsibility as employers is to maintain procedures that is going to support our workers. In the event of any incidents happening, we must have a risk management plan. We must conduct that fair and thorough investigation that's happening, should in case someone brings a complaint to you, and ensure that our workers are free from retaliation. It's a place where we want to get to, where people feel safe that they can report anything that's happening and they're not going to be penalized for it. As if the worker does not comply, then you have the opportunity to go to the skills labor, to the Nova Scotia Labor Skills and Immigration Office, and you can seek help there as well. You also make sure you record everything, keep a file of what's going on. One of the reasons why oftentimes people's human rights case breaks down is because they don't have adequate record, they don't keep any information. And so when you're asked to provide if a complaint has occurred, you're scrambling for information. So you don't want to find yourself in that position. You want to ensure that right off the bat, you are following those legal requirements. And this requirement has been made so simple because for the first time, it is not complex and the government has provided help for us. So I'm going to hand you back to Lynn, for closing comments, and if anyone has any question as we part company.
So I will ask you if you have any parting comments or questions for Anne before we wrap up for the day.
And I'm just wondering if we're able to get the slides from today's presentation.
Yes, actually,
Yes.
Anne had mentioned she was going to share those with me, and I think, Anne, you had mentioned a few resources as well you were going to send with the PowerPoint.
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah, and then I will share all of those with you, those of you that attended today. So they will go out either this afternoon or first thing in the morning, depending on when I receive them.
Yes.
As a very brief survey that I would appreciate you all fill out. It's anonymous and it just helps us with our funders so that we can continue to get funding for sessions like this one with Anne. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne, for this afternoon. And
You're
if
welcome.
any other comments, then I will shamelessly promote 2 more workshops that we have coming up with Anne. If you enjoyed today's, we have neurodiversity coming up on March 5th, and that will be 9:30 to 12:30. And it's a person session, and I can confirm that that will be at the Best Western Chocolate Lake Hotel.
Yes.
Nice and easy for those of you that are out of town and want to attend, that you don't have to come all the way downtown. And then the second one will be on March 26th, sorry, another Thursday from 9:30 to 12:30. And that one will be on psychological safety.
Yeah.
It will include a little bit on
microaggression.
Yes. We have a few requests on that. And the location on that, I'm not sure yet, but it will be HRM and also 9:30 to 12:30. So I will be sending out information on that in the next couple of days for registrations. But if you already know you're interested, you can send me an email anytime and I will put your name down. Otherwise, stay tuned for registration details. So thank you again, everyone, for taking time this afternoon. And again, the resources will be sent out along with a PowerPoint and a very brief survey link, which you may have already received. Otherwise,
We did.
thank you all very much.
Yes.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
I want you to put nice things in that survey.
You're going down, Anne Devine. You're going down.
Oh, you know, Scott, I thought we were friends.
You'll never know who.
Thank you. It was very helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.